When the esteemed diner demanded the chef, an incredible transformation unveiled. The hidden hero Harold stood in the kitchen of the old diner, the clatter of plates and the warm laughter of regulars barely penetrating the walls of his concentrated mind. He meticulously sautéed onions, their sweet aroma wafting into the air, mingling with nostalgia. His grandmother's recipes flowed through his hands like a well-practiced dance. Yet, beneath the surface of his culinary rhythm, an ache pulsated within him, an unshakable feeling of invisibility. Despite his labor, the diners only ever saw Mrs. Jensen, the wise matriarch of the diner, as the heart that fed them. The thought pierced him like a knife, sharp and agonizing. With every order of meatloaf and every plate of crispy fried chicken served, Harold felt more like a specter haunting his own kitchen. It was as if his passion, swirling like steam rising from a simmering pot, was not enough to break through the veil of anonymity. He watched patrons light up over his food. He could see their smiles, but their praises always floated to Mrs. Jensen, leaving his heart heavy with resignation. Was he nothing more than a ghost of flavor in someone else's story? He wondered, stirring marinara with a wooden spoon, lost in a tumult of emotion. Then word spread like wildfire. A trendy cafe was slated to open just down the street. An unspoken panic gathered in the little diner. Whispers rippled through familiar faces of loyal patrons who feared for the comfort food they cherished. It brought a wave of dread crashing over Harold. Could he compete with something trendy? The thought created a knot in his stomach that twisted tighter every moment. Mrs. Jensen, however, seemed unfazed. Gathering the community within the diner walls, she proposed a culinary showdown. Harold's pulse quickened in response, fear and anticipation colliding within him. "Reveal the true chef behind our diner," she declared. Cue the cheers and murmurs of excitement. But all Harold felt was panic. None of them, this spirited crowd, understood the weight of what was being asked. Could he step into the glare of public scrutiny? What if he failed? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the clock ticked closer to the showdown, Harold found himself in a tempest of self-reflection. In the attic, an old cookbook from his late father caught his eye. His father, a once revered chef, had famously delved into the depths of gastronomic genius before succumbing to his own demons. Harold thumbed through the pages, revealing recipes imbued with his father's lingering passion and pain. Each scrawl echoed of lost greatness and whispers of failure. Inside, he battled raw emotions. Did he dare step into a legacy overshadowed by tragedy? Would he choke under the weight, or could he blend his identity with his father's? With every dish he envisioned for the showdown, uncertainty prickled at him like an unkind knife. What if his effort collapsed under pressure? The familiar rhythm of the kitchen began to feel chaotic instead of soothing, each simmer and sauté layered with anxiety. As he garnished an exquisite plate in practice, uncertainty gripped him. Would it ever be enough? What would happen when the door swung open, and the expectant faces of the community saw him not merely as Harold, the cook, but as the chef they sought? The stakes weighed heavy in the air, the silence of tension thick enough to slice. His breaths grew shallow. The clash of doubt struck him harder than any kitchen timer. He teetered on the precipice of reclaiming his narrative or retreating back to anonymity, leaving his father's legacy to wither unfulfilled. As the fateful day of the culinary showdown drew near, Harold's anxiety crystallized into a relentless presence. Each tick of the clock felt amplified, echoing the urgency of his uncertain future. The thought of stepping into the limelight sent shivers through him. What if he faltered? What if he imitated his father's failures instead of honoring his legacy? The attic's dusty cookbook sat next to him like a weighty talisman, a reminder of the past that both scared and inspired him. Driven by a sudden hunger for clarity, Harold returned to the kitchen, the only realm where he felt a semblance of control. He began revisiting the recipes in his father's cookbook, craving deeper insights beyond the mere ingredients. Flipping through the pages, he noted not just the flavors but the emotional undertones that each dish carried. Dishes were not just about taste, they were stories waiting to be told. He found himself captivated, recognizing threads of emotion that echoed his own struggles. Slicing onions and dicing tomatoes, he embraced the rhythm of food preparation, a therapeutic dance with his inner self. As the scent of roasted garlic mingled with the pungent notes of fresh herbs, he felt flashes of his father's passion surge within him. Each dish he crafted now became a bridge, connecting past, present and future. Yet there was an undercurrent of trepidation. Could these creations stand in the spotlight, or would they stand in his father's shadow? Days slid by in a blur of frantic preparation, yet the more he envisioned the showdown, the more dissonance echoed in his mind. Mrs. Jensen's enthusiasm fueled excitement among the patrons, but each friendly cheer made his stomach churn. Trusting the community's faith in him was a monumental leap. Would they see him as Harold, the worthy chef, or would he remain the ghost behind Mrs. Jensen's shadow? On the eve of the showdown, with exhaustion clawing at him, he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, the cool wind brushing against his face. As he gazed at the stars twinkling in the night sky, he grasped the gravity of what awaited him. It wasn't just about competition. It was about stepping into his identity, about reclaiming a space he felt undeserving of. The diner, his sanctuary, was a canvas upon which he could draw not just flavors, but the essence of who he was. In that moment of vulnerability, he realized he had to confront his fears head-on. The showdown didn't rest solely on culinary skill. It encompassed a chance to unveil his true self, a declaration that he was more than just an extension of his father, more than a mere backdrop to Mrs. Jensen's warmth. He had the opportunity to carve out his own narrative, and with that came the realization that every plate he served would be a part of that declaration. With a new sense of resolve igniting within him, he returned to the kitchen, practicing with a fervor driven by self-discovery. Each dish now reflected his spirit, layered in flavors like layers of hurt and hope. Assembling the plates, he let go of perfectionism, embracing the authenticity of his culinary identity. The showdown would not just reveal his cooking. It would unveil the chef behind the apron that cooked out of passion rather than obligation. Perhaps it would illuminate the love for cuisine that had lingered like a whisper in his heart. As dawn broke and the day of reckoning approached, a question loomed large in Harold's mind. Was he ready to face the fear of judgment? The moment was almost here, and with it, the sacred choice to let the world meet not just a chef, but the man he was destined to become. Tomorrow would demand a reckoning. Would Harold rise to meet it, or falter beneath the weight of expectations? The anticipation crackled like electricity, daring him to push through the barrier of his own limitations. The first light of dawn wrapped around Harold like a cool embrace, awakening him from sleep's tenuous grasp. The day loomed ahead, each minute stretching with a sense of impending destiny. He lay in bed, heart racing, contemplating the weight of the moment ahead. It wasn't simply about cooking. It was about his evolution as a man and a chef, his self-worth hanging precariously in the balance. He could no longer cling to his father's legacy without asserting his own identity. Today each dish would narrate a part of his journey, not just as an echo of past triumphs, but as a canvas painted with his own vibrant strokes. Rising from the bed, he moved with purpose. Harold felt an unusual resolve fortify his posture, a deeper conviction emerging as he dressed. Once in the kitchen, the sharp knives and sizzling pans awaited him like old friends. He took a moment to breathe, inhaling the assortment of spices lining the shelves, their fragrances invigorating his spirit. Today, he would weave them together into something uniquely his. Each ingredient needed to tell his story, resonating with the heartbeats of the diners who would soon feast on his creations. As he prepped, flashes of self-doubt crawled back into his mind, igniting a familiar ambivalence. Would patrons embrace his dishes, or would their tastes yearn for the familiar comfort of his father's recipes? Slicing through vegetables, he forced himself to confront this nagging question. A recipe could be a tribute to the past, but it should also be a doorway to the future. The first dish he began to craft was an adaptation of his father's signature lasagna, a layered homage, but with twists that spoke of his own experiences. Infusing the sauce with smoky paprika and a hint of unexpected sweetness from roasted peppers, he felt a surge of excitement. Each ingredient was chosen with intention, reflecting his desire to connect with the audience on multiple levels. Would they taste his vulnerability behind the robust flavors? The kitchen soon filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs. But instead of comfort, anxiety hovered like a specter. What if the challenge exposed his insecurities instead of showcasing the chef he had fought to become? Layer by layer, with each fold of pasta, he contemplated how every bite would carry the taste of fear and triumph, of uncertainty metamorphosed into boldness. In the midst of preparation, a sudden clattering sound shattered his focus. A pan had slipped from the counter. A visceral panic gripped him, a fleeting reminder of the stakes. What would it mean to fail? Yet the thought of failure transformed. Instead of viewing it as defeat, what if he could frame it as a learning curve? The idea simmered, melding with the cacophony of clattering pans and bubbling sauce. The time to assemble his thoughts had come. He could visualize the anticipation in the diner, the familiar faces that merged in a swell of support. If he pursued each moment with authenticity, their expectations would put on a new vibrancy, shedding light on the chef he was becoming. Hours slipped through his fingers as he infused the last touches on the culinary works of art. As he plated the lasagna, he felt a vital shift. For once, he was not merely a shadow being cast by his heritage. He was the one holding the brush, painting the vibrant strokes of his unique experience. With the clock winding down, Harold closed his eyes for a moment. He envisioned a future where he stood on his own merit, his identity radiating through his dishes. The showdown was no longer a battle against expectations, but rather an opportunity to showcase the chef who had emerged through trials. His heartbeat quickened as he stepped toward the diner. Yet as he approached, a sudden realization gripped him tight. The looming faces belonged not only to those eagerly awaiting the culinary competition, but also to the presence of his father's spirit, the ultimate comparison that threatened to unravel his resolve. Could he present the essence of Harold, free from the shackles of expectations? The moment had arrived. To find out if he was ready to confront that legacy head-on, or if doubts would once more lay claim to his ambition. As he crossed the threshold, a haunting question answered itself. This was not merely about the food, it was about him. Was he ready to serve his truth? The air hummed with anticipation. Anticipation not only for the dishes but for the man he was destined to unveil. As Harold stepped into the diner, the air was thick with expectation, laughter, and the clinking of silverware. Each face turned toward him, eager but scrutinizing. He felt the weight of their gazes like a physical presence, pressing against his shoulders. This was the crucible. This was the moment he had been preparing for. Yet the anxiety that crept up his spine betrayed that conviction. He stood before the assembled diners, heart racing, feeling as though he was the last piece in a puzzle, all too eager to reveal its image. The time had come to embrace the legacy he had inherited, but also to redefine it in a way that was unapologetically his. Each dish he had prepared was a testament to his growth. Yet he stood teetering on the edge, afraid that he might slip back into the shadow of his father's reputation. With a deep breath, Harold approached the first table. He placed the lasagna before a couple, their expressions shifting from anticipation to delight as they took their first bites. Curiosity mingled with concern rippled through him. Would they taste his fear? Would they see through the layers of pasta to the insecurities that lay underneath? But as they chewed, their eyes lit up, and a wave of relief coursed through him. Their smiles blossomed into beaming approval. Each forkful showcased not just his culinary skill, but also the evolution of his identity. The bold flavors he had infused spoke of defiance against mediocrity. They echoed his quest for self-discovery. Yet as the night unfolded, he was confronted with an undeniable truth. The more he engaged, the more he found himself questioning the very essence of what he was trying to achieve. With every compliment and critique, inklings of self-doubt began to rise. Where was the line between honoring his father and celebrating his own journey? Standing before guests who came not just for meal, but for the legacy behind it, he felt the shadow of his lineage creeping closer. With a quick glance around the room, he noticed a sharp-eyed older gentleman who sat alone, rooted in a contemplative silence. Each time Harold glanced his way, the man's gaze seemed to freeze him in place, all icy scrutiny and grounded authority. Who was he? Did he carry a weighty opinion on culinary traditions? As the evening progressed, Harold found himself drawn to the older man. An inexplicable instinct propelled him toward the table, as if he were gravitating toward an invisible anchor. He placed another dish in front of him, a deconstructed version of his father's chicken piccata, exhibiting not just culinary finesse, but also his willingness to evolve classic cuisine into something fresh, daring, and personal. "Chef," the man said slowly, his voice deep and reverberating like a drum in the silence of the diner, "your father once served me. His work was impeccable, but this speaks to something entirely different." Harold's heart leaped at the validation, but beneath it lay a current of challenge. Was this man an ally or a judge? He realized that everything hinged on the delicate balance of being authentic in his artistry. The fight for recognition and approval tangled with his desire for independence. The evening stretched on, but as diners savored his creations, Harold knew he had a choice. He could either drown in the sea of expectations or swim against the tide, letting his individuality shine through each of his dishes. Noting the whirl of emotions circulating within him, he steeled himself for a deeper confrontation, not with the diner's expectations, but with his own lingering insecurities. It was not merely about validating his heritage, but about expressing every facet of Harold through his culinary creations. By the end of the night, he had found solace in the act of cooking, not just creating food but sharing a piece of himself. Yet, the more he uncovered about his own identity, the more questions began to surface. Who was he without the burden of expectation? What did it mean to carve out a path that was indubitably his? As the first patrons began to leave, he caught sight of the older gentleman once more, nodding slightly as if urging him to explore an uncharted territory. The revelation loomed large. He faced an undeniable truth, one that trembled at the edges of his mind. The time had come to confront the nature of his artistry. Could he fully embrace every ingredient, every flavor, every experience that had shaped him, and declare it to the world as his own, free from constraints? The moment of introspection drew him deeper into an ocean of possibilities. He sensed a transformative potential beneath the surface, just waiting to be uncovered. But as he prepared to approach that pivotal next moment, a shadow caught his eye from the back of the diner. A figure emerged clothed in an all-too-familiar attire. Harold's breath caught in his throat. The unmistakable silhouette radiated authority. As the figure stepped closer, he recognized that this was someone who represented the very standards he felt bound to defy, the ultimate test of his resolve. Harold's pulse quickened. Would this be the moment of truth he had both yearned for and dreaded? Would he rise to the occasion, or would doubt fold him back into his past? The figure glided toward him, exuding a confidence that made the air around Harold seem charged with electricity. It was Gwendolyn, a renowned food critic whose reviews could make or break a restaurant. She had been a constant in his father's world, a relentless voice of expertise, yet now here she was, a potential adversary standing in the doorway to Harold's aspirations. "Harold," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips, "I've been hearing the whispers about your cooking. It seems you've brought quite the transformation to this place." Each word was carefully measured, a probe to gauge his response. Her eyes were sharp, assessing not just the sophistication of his cooking but the weight of his personal evolution. He balled his fists at his sides, feeling an overwhelming swell of determination compete with the tide of doubt. This was not only about proving himself as a chef. It was a chance to assert his own identity in the culinary world. Reclaiming the diner meant claiming his place in the tradition, but it also meant carving a new path altogether. "Thank you, Gwendolyn," he replied, attempting to keep his voice steady despite the tremors of anxiety that rippled through him. "I've been working hard to make this my own." "Your own indeed," she said, tilting her head in thought. "Let us see if it lives up to the hype. Why don't you bring me one more dish? Something that captures your vision, your essence." With a nod that felt more like an oath than an agreement, Harold turned to the kitchen. What could he create that would embody his journey? The struggles that lay beneath his surface. The lasagna had showcased his skill, while the deconstructed chicken piccata had hinted at bold moves. But he needed to dig deeper. He rifled through the ingredients, scanning each for their story, their potential. His eyes landed on an array of local vegetables, vibrant and characterized by their seasonal reality. He grabbed garlic, heirloom tomatoes, fresh herbs, ingredients that told stories of their origin. They weren't just elements on a plate but parts of a narrative he now had the power to tell. As he began to chop and sauté, He felt the rhythm of the kitchen surge. Each knife stroke echoed the beat of his heart. The fiery stove blazed beneath him, a metaphor for the intense pressure now coiling around his gut. The pressure was both exhilarating and terrifying, the fervor of transformation. He was unraveling layers of himself as surely as he was peeling the garlic. With each ingredient that hit the pan, memories flickered of learning from his father, of watching him instinctually balance flavors, and of the weight of the wisdom that shaped him. Yet Harold began to understand that innovation did not mean eliminating his past, but pushing through it. He was layering his culinary identity like a dish, melding tradition and newly found elements into one cohesive creation. As he plated the dish, an improvisation that represented both homage and audacity, he couldn't shake the nerves. Harold understood the risks of revealing his vulnerability through food. Would it resonate, or would it flop spectacularly? He presented the dish to Gwendolyn, a vibrant medley that danced across the plate, of vibrant ratatouille, bursting with color, garnished with microgreens and drizzled with a tangy reduction. He breathed deeply, steadying his composure as he placed it before her. Here it is. A celebration of my roots, but also a presentation of my journey, he declared, his voice laced with nerves yet underscored by a steady intent. Gwendolyn studied him, her scrutiny now feeling like an examination of his very soul. With a fork poised, she took her first bite. The silence that descended upon them felt monumental, heavy with the gravity of his aspirations. Should he anticipate approval? Would she affirm these layers of identity he was striving to construct? Or was he primed for a critique so scathing it could reverberate through the diner, through his heart? As her expression shifted, emanating shock mixed with intrigue, Harold's heart raced. The world shrank to that singular moment. He was on the precipice, waiting as judgment hung thick in the air. Then she set down her fork, eyes sparkling with intensity. Harold, I believe you've transcended expectations. This is not just food. It's your identity on a plate, she said, excitement radiating from her voice. Hope surged within him, igniting a flame he hadn't known he needed. But just as relief began to settle in, the shadow of doubt crept back. Had he merely passed one test, or was there more lurking beyond the threshold of this moment? Gwendolyn leaned forward, her voice dropping to an earnest whisper. But tell me, Harold, how far are you willing to go to define your legacy? His world twisted around that one question, a labyrinth of uncertainties unfurling in his mind. Was he ready to confront not only the expectations that lingered, but also the deeper truths of who he could become? As her gaze bore into him, demanding answers rooted in authenticity, he sensed that the real journey was only just beginning, and that step further down this path would define his destiny. The morning light streamed through the diner's windows, casting a golden hue that illuminated the worn wooden tables and the walls decorated with decades of local history. Harold stood at the counter, his mind racing as he replayed Gwendolyn's words. How far are you willing to go to define your legacy? It echoed relentlessly, but instead of overwhelming him, it ignited a flicker of ambition. He tightened his apron, acknowledging the burden of his father's legacy. Each plate he served had the potential to shape what this diner stood for, not just for him, but for the memories it carried. As patrons began to trickle in for the lunchtime rush, Harold prepared himself for the scrutiny of their appraising eyes. He caught sight of his reflection in the stainless steel surface, a young man defined not just by lineage, but by an evolving vision. With each order that came in, Harold felt the familiar exhilaration of the kitchen's adrenaline. It was a symphony of clattering pots, sizzling pans, and the soft hum of conversation. He navigated effortlessly, yet in his chest, anticipation thrummed, a palpable reminder that every dish was an opportunity to push boundaries. The lunchtime crush escalated as orders stacked high. Harold, 2 burgers and a side of fries, shouted Molly, his lively waitress. Each request challenged him to elevate flavors without losing the essence of diner comfort. The bell jingled as a new customer entered. Harold stole a glance. It was Gwendolyn again, this time seated at a corner booth, her notepad poised for observation. The pressure mounted again, but this time it drove him to innovate further. What could he make that could surprise even the keen critic? A wave of inspiration hit him. He decided to create a twist on the classic burger. What if he infused it with local ingredients to reinvent a staple? He envisioned a caramelized onion jam layered with a smoked Gouda melted atop a juicy, grass-fed beef patty, with arugula for a peppery crunch and a hint of balsamic glaze to elevate the experience. But it wasn't just about the ingredients. He thought of the process, the care and passion behind each layer, a tangible representation of his struggle to carve out his space in this legacy. As he prepped, Harold found himself lost in a dance of flavors and techniques his father had taught him. He felt himself channeling that old wisdom, tempered now with bold confidence. He quickly seared the patties, allowing them to develop a rich crust, while assembling the remaining components of the dish with surgical precision. When the burgers were finished, he placed them elegantly on the plates next to golden, hand-cut fries. Before he could second-guess himself, he sent them out to Gwendolyn with a swift motion, his heart thumping with a mix of eagerness and dread. Would she see the intention and courage behind his creation? Minutes stretched like an eternity as he attended to other tables, offering warm smiles while his thoughts danced back to Gwendolyn. The realization struck him he could no longer hide behind the comfort of the past or the expectations of others. This was his moment to carve a legacy that was uniquely his, a connection to both tradition and the fresh perspective he was harnessing. Finally, Gwendolyn raised her fork and took a bite. Time seemed to freeze. Her eyes widened, a shift of intrigue as her face registered delight. Was this the validation he had been searching for? He felt vulnerable standing there, watching the hope in her expression. "Harold," she said, excitement tinged with genuine surprise. "This is extraordinary. I didn't expect a burger could evoke such depth. But tell me, were you ever intimidated by this choice? You've taken a risk here." He felt exposed as she leaned forward, seeking not only to understand the dish but the man behind it. The question struck a nerve. Did he dare reveal the hesitations that often haunted him? Face his fears in front of someone as formidable as her? As Gwendolyn continued her critique, Harold's mind raced. Yes, he had hesitated at every turn, fearing he would fail to meet his father's shadow or the expectations of those who knew him. Yet now, standing firmly in this kitchen, he recognized that facing those fears head-on was not just relevant, it was essential to defining his legacy. More than intimidated, he finally replied, locking eyes with her. "I was terrified. But it's in confronting that fear that I've found my voice." He took a breath, steeling himself for the journey ahead. But even as clarity washed over him, another question lingered: how would he continue to transform with each dish, each decision? And would Gwendolyn be the voice that pushed him to go even further? Or would she become part of the storm he had to face? The heartbeat of the diner pulsed around him, and he knew one thing. The stakes were rising, and it was time to lean into the challenge more than ever before. As he cleared her plate, Gwendolyn's eyes sparkled with curiosity, a spark he interpreted as beckoning him toward yet uncharted territory. "What next, Harold? Where will this journey take you?" She prodded, her gaze demanding more. The weight of her expectation loomed large, but instead of crumbling, Harold felt the tension spurring him onward. The true test lay ahead as he confronted not just the expectations a reflection of his past, but also the exhilarating uncertainty of what his future could hold. The next dish, the next choice, it was all entwined with the legacy that was just beginning to unfurl. Would he have the courage to fully embrace it? The sound of clattering dishes and the chatter of customers faded into the background as Harold absorbed Gwendolyn's question. There was something profound about it that threatened to unravel the carefully woven narrative he had crafted for himself. What came next was crucial not just for his career, but for the man he was becoming. In that moment of introspection, the kitchen transformed from a playground of creativity to a crucible of pressure. He paced the small space, the walls surrounded him, almost as if they were monitoring his thoughts. Each step echoed the questions gnawing at him. What did he want to create? Would it reflect the essence of who he was, or would he succumb to the familiar pull of safety? Time was no longer a luxury. It felt like a ticking clock, urging him to act. With a deep breath, he swiftly manufactured a mental list of culinary ideas that might elevate both his offerings and himself. "Something bold," he murmured, enunciating the words as if they were a chant. "Something genuine." He opened the fridge, discovering an array of fresh ingredients as if they were calling out to him. The heirloom tomatoes were ripe, and the local basil had a fragrance that teased his senses. He envisioned a vibrant tart that combined a savory crust with layers of those tomatoes, drizzled with rich balsamic reduction and crowned with fluffy burrata, embodying a balance of flavors that privileged local craftsmanship. A surge of exhilaration coursed through him as he collected his ingredients, his fingers tingling with purpose. This was no ordinary dish, it was a reflection of his journey, a dish that told the story of overcoming hurdles, embracing local roots and forging connections. As he worked, the repetitive motions soothed him. Each slice of the knife through the fresh produce was like shedding layers of doubt. The vibrant reds and greens looked like a painting coming to life. He dedicated himself completely to the preparation, breaking free from the scrutiny of Gwendolyn's gaze for now. But just as he was gaining momentum, Molly peeked around the corner, her cheerful demeanor offset by a hint of concern. "Harold, you all right? You're losing him out there." "Just a couple of tables left," she said, her voice laced with urgency. He paused, feeling tension return like an unwelcome visitor. Did he want to take this risk without proper assurance that it would be accepted? The diner was accustomed to traditional fare, and he could hear faint echoes of his father's voice, warning him against straying too far from the usual. But could he truly honor his father's legacy by adhering to the status quo? Instinctual anger surged through him. This was his time to seize the narrative, to redefine what his family's diner represented. "All right, let us do this," he decided aloud, harnessing the energy around him like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. He plated the tart with meticulous care, allowing his artistic side to enter the fray one final flourish before he could present it to the world. With the dish in hand, he stepped into the dining area where a few familiar faces lingered, their chatter merging harmoniously with the nostalgic tunes wafting through the air. All eyes were on him, including Gwendolyn's, more scrutinizing than before. "Harold," she gestured, her expression a mix of intrigue and challenge. "Is this your next creation?" The moment felt electric, fraught with tension. Here he stood, ready to reveal not just a dish, but a manifestation of his evolving self. Would they accept it? Could he defy his past? "Yes, yes it is," he managed to reply, a spark of confidence illuminating his voice. As he delivered the plate to Gwendolyn, the tension reached a fever pitch. What would the critique unveil? Would it empower him? Or would it mean facing the disapproval that had haunted him all along? "Let us see how far you've really come, Harold," Gwendolyn stated, her gaze locked onto his. "I'm eager to witness your transformation." The air thickened with suspense. This moment would either mark a significant shift in his path or remind him of the crippling fears that still lay within. And as he stood before her, his heart raced, waiting for her verdict would be both the beginning and the end of something pivotal. But he just want her approval. Alongside the yearning for validation, a deeper realization dawned. He needed to know if he could trust himself enough to embrace the unknown. Would he emerge from the diner's routines, ready to embrace this evolution? The answer loomed tantalizingly just out of reach, and Harold knew he had to summon the strength to grasp it. Did he have what it takes to not simply evolve, but actively define a new path ahead for himself in the diner? The first bite was a revelation. Gwendolyn's fork paused midair, the tart hovering just before her lips, while her eyes narrowed, evaluating every detail of the dish. Harold felt time dissolve as he studied her reaction. The surrounding chatter faded, leaving only the electric pulse of his heartbeat resonating in his ears. Would this one moment dictate the course of his culinary journey? Gwendolyn's face transformed, shifting from intrigue to contemplation. The slight narrowing of her brows told him she was dissecting not only the flavors but the intention behind them. He had put his soul into the tart, crafting it from the embers of doubt and the flames of his ambitions. Yet, as much as he sought her approval, he also craved clarity within himself. Did he believe this was worthy of praise? "Harold," she began, her voice cutting through the tense air. "The flavors are indeed bold, but—" She paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle. His heart raced anew, bracing for her criticism to rattle his confidence. She took the bite, chewing slowly, and for a moment Harold was lost in a whirlpool of self-doubt. Perhaps he had pushed too far. The crust might not hold up to their memories of crispy diners he had grown up in. The flavor profile, though vibrant, could be seen as too adventurous for the regulars. The acidity is strikingly fresh, and the burrata, it's delightful. The relief washed over him as a tide of warmth. Gwendolyn was tasting his journey, the tumultuous mix of rebellion intertwined with respect for tradition. You've really moved beyond what this place has been known for. I see you breaking through. Her approval ignited something within him, a yearning to push boundaries while honoring the essence of comfort food. It was validation, but it was more than that. It was recognition of the evolution he had set in motion. Yet, a nagging thought lingered, almost like a whisper in the back of his mind. Was this enough? Had he truly arrived at the destination he envisioned, an artist crafting his own narrative rather than merely a chef executing orders? He knew his work wasn't done. The initial surge of excitement was only the beginning. The eclectic dish could have an entirely different reaction among the other diners. As he scanned the room, he noticed an older couple, regulars who had been frequenting the diner long before he was born. Their expressions were inscrutable, and tension reshaped the atmosphere around him. Harold, Molly's voice broke through his deepening introspection, her tone a mix of admiration and challenge. The next table just asked about the special. Are you ready to serve it? As her words sunk in, an exhilaration shot through him, laced with newfound purpose. He recalled the exhilaration of slicing through the produce, and it all surged back, the vibrant potential hidden in every ingredient. The stories waiting to be uncovered. Let us go, he replied, now brimming with determination. He scooped up more tarts, peeling away the protective layers of uncertainty. This was a chance not just to present a dish but to start a dialogue with the guests. He approached the elderly couple, their eyes narrowing as he placed the colorful tart in front of them. Please give it a try, he encouraged, his voice steady, infused with a belief he hadn't known he possessed until this moment. Was he truly ready to challenge them, to invite their opinions into his evolution? It felt liberating, embracing the risk of vulnerability while presenting his work. The first forkful lifted to the lady's mouth ignited a sense of adrenaline that mirrored the kitchen's fire. As she savored the flavors, he realized he was no longer afraid of the weight of their judgment. He had stepped into a world where culinary art reflected his journey, the food serving as a canvas for his growth. What he could not anticipate was the whirlwind of emotions that awaited him in just a few moments. As her face morphed from surprise to something more profound. The bar had been raised. The challenge had morphed into something more complex. And as he eagerly awaited their response, a clear thought drifted into his mind. Embracing this evolution would mean venturing into unexpected realms, and the path ahead would demand even greater courage. What would their verdict reveal about not just his dish, but his very identity? Her reaction unfolded slowly, a mixture of confusion and intrigue blending across the couple's faces. As the fork hovered just above the plate, Harold's pulse quickened, each echo of silence amplifying the weight of anticipation. The lady's partner, carefully observing her expression, leaned in slightly. What's the verdict, my dear? His voice held a blend of mischief and concern. Her eyes darted from the tart to Harold, evaluating the man behind the dish. The seconds stretched painfully, and he could feel the energy in the room shift, tension curling around him like a tightening noose. Where once there was eagerness, now uncertainty settled like fog. Harold, can you tell me more about this? She finally asked, her eyebrows slightly raised, inviting conversation rather than criticism. It dawned on him that she wasn't merely looking to critique the dish, but to understand the story woven into it. The request was a doorway, a chance to peel back the layers of his culinary philosophy. Swallowing down his nerves, he began to speak, wanting to capture the essence of what had motivated him to create this tart. I wanted to blend the familiarity of home with the excitement of new flavors. The acidity in the berries, he gestured animatedly, it's a reflection of how my childhood memories felt. Sharp yet thrilling, like discovering a hidden treasure in my grandmother's kitchen. With each word, he felt a layer of the tension melt away, leaving behind a raw vulnerability that he hadn't anticipated. Still, as her gaze narrowed once more in contemplation, he couldn't help but question whether he was truly communicating what he had set out to do. Interesting, she murmured, finally tasting the dish, lingering over the textures and flavors that swirled together harmoniously. Harold's heart raced as he tried to decipher her reactions, from small twitches of her lips to the subtle nods she gave. Then she paused, allowing the taste to fully engage her thoughts. Harold, this is bold. You're offering a new narrative to comfort food, but do you think the patrons here are ready for that? Her query hung in the air, heavy with implications. She had served up a challenge that sifted through his mind like sand through an hourglass. Was he prepared to face resistance from the diner's regular clientele, who had expectations rooted in nostalgic comforts? With a rush, he realized his journey wasn't merely about pushing boundaries, but inviting people along with him. I want them to embrace something different, to taste change and adapt just as I have. Each word fortified his conviction. It wasn't a mere defiance against tradition. It was a challenge to contribute to their culinary experience, one where he could spark curiosity instead of adhering strictly to the familiar. Her partner finally spoke. That's admirable, but have you considered the risk? His tone was both curious and cautious, a reminder of the unpredictable nature of challenging long-held traditions. The thought ricocheted in his mind, forcing him to confront the reality of his aspirations head-on. Could he risk his identity as a chef for the sake of innovation? Once again he glanced across the room filled with familiar faces and voices. The waitstaff hustled, preparing for the dinner rush, and as they relayed orders and laughter, he couldn't shake the growing discomfort. The weight of expectation felt heavier than ever before, mixing with his fervent desire to be seen not just as a cook, but as an artist. Each dish is an experience, he finally said, trying to ground his thoughts. Every flavor has a story, and I want my food to tell those stories anew. In this evolution there is growth, and growth requires a leap. He felt invigorated, empowered by the clarity blooming within him. But soon after doubt crept in. Would the leap be too great? Their eyes held his as they deliberated his words, a moment frozen between uncertainty and possibility. He could feel anticipation thrumming through the air, yet his instincts pushed him deeper into introspection. And as their features softened into contemplation, he knew that the next step required not just culinary skill, but the audacity to accept his truth. The initial bite had been a transformative moment, but what would it take for him to truly leap into the unknown and embrace the artist within? As Harold stood amidst the bustling diner, he felt the vibrant energy of anticipation pulse around him. Each table buzzed with chatter, every familiar face now holding an electric gaze on his creations. He had dared to redefine his culinary identity, stepping onto a path illuminated by innovation and self-discovery. Yet as the potential barriers loomed in his mind, he realized this was his moment for full immersion into self-reliance, mastery, and pride. The previous night's experience had solidified something profound within him. With every successful dish served, he felt layers of doubt strip away. No longer would he be a ghost overtaken by his father's legacy. He would sculpture his identity with deliberate strokes, crafting flavors that spoke to his journey. He quickly glanced around the diner, mentally preparing for the new opportunities lying ahead. The lunchtime rush ignited with new energy. Each order that came in felt like an exciting challenge, a testament to the growth he had undergone. Something in his demeanor had shifted. His passion radiated a palpable warmth that reached across the counter, mingling with the savory smells wafting from the kitchen. Orders began to flow in a delightful rhythm beyond mere sustenance. They were invitations to dialogue. "Harold, we need 3 specials and 2 burgers." Molly called out, her enthusiasm infectious. The familiar rhythm of the kitchen steadied him. He saw this as not just a task but a canvas where he could express the artistry born from struggle, triumph, and revelation. With brisk confidence he returned to the sauce he had chosen for that day, a harmonious melange that celebrated summertime tomatoes, fragrant basil, and a deft richness that suggested more than traditional comfort. As he stirred the pot, he saw more than flavors. He saw the journey he had embarked on, a reflection of past challenges defining something anew. When he sent the first orders out, he felt a rush of pride unlike before. His creations began to serve as a bridge connecting his history with future dreams. With each plate against the backdrop of laughter and conversation, he could sense the shift. Patrons were tasting more than just food, they tasted the evolving story of who he was becoming. As patrons took their first bites, a delightful murmur spread across the diner. He caught sight of the elderly couple again, their eyes wide with surprise as they savored his tart. The husband looked towards him, nodding with approval that surged through his veins like a tidal wave of validation. Had he truly struck a chord? As if in answer, a wave of patrons quickly followed. 2 additional tables placed their orders for the new specials, intrigued by what they had seen on the plates of others. The sense of community wrapped around him in a soothing embrace. It was more than just the thrill of culinary success. It was an acceptance of who he was, unfiltered and unrestrained. Yet Gwendolyn's earlier words echoed in the back of his mind, thickening the air with anticipation. How far are you willing to go to define your legacy? This was a stepping stone, not the destination. Would he continue to push the envelope? Could transformation extend beyond these walls? Bold determination led him deeper into the kitchen, igniting inspiration that churned with every slice, every sauté. He envisioned a new dish, one that encapsulated not only his reinvention, but the heart of the diner, the place where stories intertwine. He decided to create a farmer's plate, a visual feast of seasonal vegetables artfully arranged. Each component would symbolize his commitment to community, authenticity, and flavors unmoored from fear. When he presented it to Gwendolyn, poised at her corner booth, the atmosphere shifted again. She had become part curator and part observer in his narrative of evolution. Her eyes scrutinized the dish, but her expression held a spark of intrigue that he had never seen before. A quiet, collective anticipation surrounded them, a moment of revelation shared between the artist and the critic. Harold, she traced her fork over the plating, savoring its beauty. This is a reflection of you, evolving and vibrant. It feels like you're inviting us into your journey. As the flavors danced on her palate, Harold realized he had indeed taken steps further than a chef usually dared, marching forth into uncharted territory, claiming his culinary identity with full force. Her validation transcended mere meal critique. It held a mirror to his soul, reflecting the strength he had unearthed in himself. The initial flickers of doubt that had accompanied each creative leap began to fade further into memory. Instead, confidence grew within him as he connected with the patrons, illuminating possibilities through his culinary expressions. Every utterance of appreciation felt less triggered by longing for acceptance, and more a celebration of self-discovery. Hours passed, filled with laughter, savory bites, and constructive critiques, but more importantly, a burgeoning admiration from the loyal patrons who had always been a part of this diner's heartbeat. As the shift drew to a close, Harold stood amid the clinking plates and buoyant conversations. He saw not just a future rooted in respect for tradition, but also an unwavering vision for the legacy. He could cultivate one where individuality and honesty met with art itself. Finally accepting that he was a chef in his own right, he inhaled deeply, basking in the warmth of fulfilled potential. In this subtle yet resolute transition, Harold knew he had transformed not just the diner, but himself. Tomorrow would be another day, another opportunity to build upon today's victories. Today, Harold had not only crafted a meal, he had crafted a life, a narrative of persistence and triumph woven through flavors of authenticity. In that very act, he had begun to define a legacy rooted not simply in history, but in the promise of continued discovery. As the last patron departed, he turned to the counter, taking a moment to reflect. The path of a chef was more than just culinary skill. It required courage. He allowed himself a small smile, the taste of far greater things resting ahead. This was one moment in an ongoing journey, a journey he was proud to embrace. Now let's not wait any longer. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.